Hi, I'm Ed Thorne. It's good to see you. In this video, I'm going to run you through 5 of the best plugins I've found in the last year. These are plugins I use in every single mix session. They're all available from Plugin Boutique. I'll leave a link in the description below. And stick around till the end for a bonus free plugin. Number 1 is SPECTRE from Waves Factory. Now, this is a harmonic enhancing EQ style plugin. It works like a parametric EQ where you can select frequency bands and bell curves and introduce harmonics to the signal at those specific frequency points. We also have different types of harmonics we can add, whether it's tube saturation, tape saturation, lo-fi or 8-bit, and so on. So there's plenty of options to choose from. This plugin and technique is a trick I learned from Jason Joshua at Abbey Road for his Mix with the Masters seminar earlier this year, and it works really well on vocals. So here's the vocal dry.
To come down to the lakeside, won't you come down by the shady shore? Take the load up off your shoulder. You don't need to carry that no more.
Now, it's in a good place there already, but I think we can add a little bit more character to it. So what I've got here is a bit of a low-mid kind of bump at 300 at about a decibel, and then I'm going to play around with the top end because this is where this plugin really works.
To come down to the lakeside, won't you come down by the shady shore? Take the load up off your shoulder. You don't need to carry that no more. Lay it down by the lakeside, lay it down by the shady shore. We're traveling light.
So it's adding some presence, but not necessarily adding EQ as such. But you can feel there's a lift in the top end when I add the 4K and the 10K shelf there.
To come down to the lakeside, won't you come down by the shady shore? Take the load up off your shoulder. You don't need to carry that no more. Lay it down by the lakeside, lay it down by the shady shore. We're traveling light.
So it's helping the vocals sit more forward and on top of the mix, right where the vocals should do. Number 2, we have Spaced Out from Baby Audio. I've got this on a guitar at the moment that I just wanted a bit more depth and dimension to, but this works really well on vocals as well for creating interesting delays and kind of sparkly effects underneath things. But for today, let's have a listen to the guitars without. Now, there's tons of effects, presets to play with to get you in a good ballpark, and then there's plenty of things that you can play with to tweak this. For example, the circles here are delay points, so you can program in on which 16th note in the bar you want the delay. That's pretty cool. You got a ducker if you want the effects to duck below the audio, and you can control how wet and dry the signal is, and there's various different reverbs on the side with different programs, small space, medium space, and outer space, which is pretty epic and makes things sound huge. Number 3, we have Smart Gate from Sonible, and drum gating and gating other instruments, including vocals, is always a bit finicky. However, this plugin saves the day because under the hood of this plugin, it's got spectral processing, which means you can isolate specific instruments. At the top here, we have a menu of target instruments that we want to isolate. So we're going to go for the kick here. And what we have to do is play some audio, press Analyze, and Smart Gate will find the frequencies of that instrument, isolate those, and get rid of anything else. On the kick drum, this works exceptionally well because it will remove the top end using the spectral analyzer that it has. It works well on vocals as well, and snare drum, and toms, of course. I will always manually gate. However, this plugin does do a very good job. But on kick drum without, so immediately, the default setting, you can hear night and day difference. It's cutting out everything in between the kick drum notes that you don't necessarily need. But if we want further control, Sonible has us covered. The level bias is the amount of spectral processing that the plugin is doing. Now, 100% is quite obscene, and 50% is actually credit to the plugin, usually about right. I'd typically use it between about 50 and 65%. The attack is how quickly the spectral processing is imposed. The threshold is, of course, at what point you want this to kick in. And we have the release timing, which is particularly useful if you want to get more of the body and the sustain and the transient release of the drum hit before you get to the next cymbal hit that might bleed into it. Otherwise, it can be quite a short sound. Now, for some sources, for example, gating white noise triggers on snare drum, this could be really useful if you wanted a kind of sound, but if you want to you can play with the release of this. And hold is obviously how long the gate stays open before releasing and closing again. This works really well on snare drum as well. It does a good job on toms, but personally, I will always manually gate toms. There's no plugin in the world that gets this right, in my opinion. But for kick drum, this is my go-to. Snare drum, go-to as well. And it actually works really well on vocals. And in fact, I use this plugin now on all of my video voiceovers, just to get rid of those kind of harsh Matt Bellamy breaths in between phrases. Number 4, we have Sound City Studios from Universal Audio that has literally just come out in the last week. I'll post a link to my full video here with loads of audio examples on loads of different sounds. But where this particularly stood out for me was on a choir vocal. UA have sampled the room for various different instruments, including drums in the live setting, in the corner, and also in the main room with gobos for a smaller sound, acoustic guitars and piano, and also reamping and remiking guitar sources. For example, if we go to remic mode and guitar, we can basically reamp stuff through the different guitar cabs that they have at the studio and including the PA speakers that they have. We can also play with different combinations of microphones in different positions, close mic'd and room mics at 2 different stages. We can change the distance of these microphones from the source in the microphone mixer here, and we can also balance those microphones as well. In this window, we have an equalizer, a dynamics section for the effects this is, and also we can send all these effects to the reverb chamber at Sound City Studios. There's a lot of parameters to play with, and I think I found a good one for the choir.
Down by the water, down by the water, down by the water, won't you lay your burden? Take your burden off your shoulder now and lay it all down. Take your burden off your shoulder now. Down by the water, down by the water, down by the water, won't you lay your burden? Take your burden off your shoulder now and lay it all down. Take your burden off your shoulder now.
So it's capturing the essence of an ensemble choir performing in that room. The amount of tailoring you can do with the sounds to get it just right and sitting in the mix beautifully is fantastic. And I think from what I hear from the records, I think Universal Audio have done a good job sampling this studio. Last but not least, but probably the best and most powerful tool that I now basically can't live without, is Ozone 11 Mastering Suite. Now, this plugin is fantastic for 2 things. One, it's kind of a feedback plugin, so you can run this through, analyze your mix. I would normally have this on a mix bus, but for the sake of this video, my computer can't handle recording, screencasting, and running this plugin. It is very CPU heavy, so it can't handle it at the same time. So I've bounced the previous track of all the examples so far in the video, and we're in a separate session now, and I'm just going to use this effectively for mastering. It's good for 2 things. One, it gives you feedback on where the tonal balance and the EQ curve of your mix is. And 2, it can help you take your mix and effectively master. Now, I use this word with caution because I am a believer of sending mixers to a third party to get a third party set of ears, opinion and reference on the track, and also someone whose, ears are more tailored to mastering and probably has a better monitoring system than most people do. But in terms of delivering mixes to clients who may be wondering why your mix doesn't sound as loud as the masters they're hearing on the radio, this plugin has loads of features to help balance your tonal EQ curve, improve your stereo imaging, improve the clarity of your mixes, and also push those levels and effectively fake master, let's say master your track, I would call it fake mastering, but effectively master your track for clients to represent your work as well as possible. Now, what I would do with my mastering engineers, I use a few, is send them a mix of the track without any limiting, and then a mix of the track that I've sent to the client with this imposed and whatever other limiting I may use. So what we're going to do is let Ozone listen to the loudest part of the mix, make its analysis, and see what tools it gives us that it thinks will maximize the quality and the sound of our track.
Down to the lakeside, won't you come down by the city shore? Take the load up off your shoulder. You don't need to carry that no more. Lay it down by the lakeside, let drown by the city shore. We're traveling light, yeah, we're down to the lakeside.
All right, so what Ozone has given me here is what I'd like to consider the ultimate pat on the back, which is that it thinks there's no mid-range processing that needs to be done to this mix. Now, as far as I'm aware from people I speak to, without fail, Ozone will return an EQ curve where you need more sub and more top end. That just seems to be a default. I would back this off slightly. I think 2 dB is fair enough in the top end. The low end, yeah, I'm a bit hesitant at that, but that means I basically need to go into my mix and figure out what's happening in the sub. So from a feedback point of view, this is a very useful plugin. I'm just going to back that off a little bit, though, for my own taste. But fundamentally, the important thing is my mid-range is in a good place. So you may notice this equalizer is the first module. Let's have a listen with and without.
Down to the lakeside, won't you come down by the city shore? Take the
So straight away, I have to agree with the low end. It is adding a nice foundation, and that's after backing it off. Next up, we have an impact plugin, which is kind of a multi-band dynamics processing.
down to the lakeside, won't you come down by the city shore? Take the load up off your shoulder.
And then we have our stereo imaging enhancer.
Down to the lakeside, won't you come down by the city shore? Take the load up off your shoulder.
And we can see the different bands there. What that's basically doing is widening quite a bit at this frequency band, module 3. A little bit at 2, it's doing nothing in the low end, and a little bit in the top end. Now, Clarity is an interesting plugin because what this is doing is basically making the top end clear, and it's kind of filtering a lot of stuff out, like resonances that you don't necessarily want. This you have to use with caution. Have a listen.
Down to the lakeside, won't you come down by the city shore? Take the load up off your shoulder. You don't need to carry that no more. Lay it down by the lakeside.
I typically use this about 15 or 20 on the amount scale there, because I think 25, the default, I feel is a little bit too much. It does create quite a bright mix. The stabilizer tool is a general whole mix dynamic EQ.
Down to the lakeside, won't you come down by the city shore? Take the load up off your shoulder. You don't
Again, I'd back this off slightly. I'm brushing over this very quickly to give you an idea if you haven't used Ozone before, but there's so many features in here, it's ridiculous. And you can, of course, add even more modules should you want to. All right, dynamic EQ, pretty self-explanatory. That's just taking out a few in the EQ dynamic range every now and then.
down to the lakeside, won't you come down by the city shore? Take the load up.
But in this mix, you can actually particularly hear that working at 200 odd and whatever 1K there. Now, the reassuring thing again is that it's only really doing about 1 decibel. So that means, again, the mix is in the ballpark. These are, if it was more than 1 decibel, I would be worried and I'd be going back into the mix. But at a decibel, I'm happy I can leave that to the mastering engineer or Ozone.
Down to the lakeside, won't you come down?
And maximizer, this is where the fun stuff starts. So this is basically where we're aiming for our LUFS levels and how much clipping we want, how much upward compression we want, what kind of character do we want, how much Transient integrity do we want to keep? What kind of sustain on the transients do we want? There's so many features in this. I won't go into this in this video, but you're getting an idea of just how much this can fix a mix. So without the maximizer,
Down to the lakeside, won't you come down by the city shore? Take the load up off your shoulder. You don't need to carry that no more.
let's say be the whole mix with and without Ozone mastering suite.
Down to the lakeside, won't you come down by the city shore? Take the load up off your shoulder. You don't need to carry that no more.
I think you can agree it sounds a lot better with. This is what I would send to my clients to give them the best representation of not just my mix, but myself as well. And then they can sign that off and I can give this copy and a copy unlimited to the mastering engineer. And then they can do what they want and use their ears and further expertise. And then I'll listen myself, compare the two once I've got the master back. And if I'm happy with it, send it off to the client. Happy days. I can't live without this plugin anymore. Ozone 11, check it out. And finally, the free plugin. But in the introduction, I said I had one. Well, I actually have two for you. The first one is Action Tremolo from Noiseash Audio. You guitarists will be familiar with what a tremolo is and does. For those of you who aren't, it basically oscillates the volume for you. Now, typically guitar players would use a whammy bar for this. But the plugin will do it automatically for you and you can do it in sync with your music. So I use this quite subtly, but there's also a really nice drive harmonics feature on this, and there's also a pan modulator as well. Now I would typically use the pan modulator on this, however, this is what plugin part 2 is for. I've got a synth organ part here, and I'm trying to create some movement with the tremolo. This is without. And with. So you can set the rate at which that is fluctuating, creating a nice vibe to the part there. And we can also add some drive for some saturation. And I've got a little bit of crunch going on here for some presence. Obviously, you can destroy it. We're not going to do that. I'm going to keep it roughly where it was. And then we have the pan modulation for moving the part from side to side, which I've done on this to create some movement. Now, this plugin does a good job at this, but actually moving on to plugin number 2, this is MAuto Pan from Melda. I feel like this is a bit more obvious, and in this track, I wanted it really obvious. Now, fellow YouTuber Paul Third criticised me in our recent episode of the Working Audio Tools podcast, where we have mixed this track from the Produce Like a Pro Academy set of multi-tracks. We've compared and critiqued each other's mixes in that episode. I'll leave a link in the description below if you want to hear the full mix, Paul Third's version, and comparing notes on how we've mixed that. And Paul claimed that I'd overdone this with this plugin, which in hindsight I kind of agree with, but for maximum effect, I quite liked it. Now, both plugins have options to manipulate how the signal moves from side to side. For example, I would typically use a sine because it's nice and smooth going from side to side, but you could go as abrupt as a square, which is almost ping-ponging from side to side. For backing vocal delays, this is a good feature, but I would definitely do that in Auto Pan over Action Tremolo. But Action Tremolo, like we've said, works really well on instruments. MAuto Pan takes these features a little bit further and you can really tailor the shapes. I think I had somewhere like that, so it's somewhere in between a square, but it's still moving. Maybe it's a bit too abrupt. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Remember, both of these plugins are free. They're not actually available through Plugin Boutique, but I'll leave links to Melda Productions and Noiseash Audio in the description. I've been Ed Thorne. Thanks for watching. It's been emotional. Be sure to check out the links to all the plugins in the description below. Also, check out the Working Audio Tools podcast, where Paul Third and I constructively critique each other's mixes and interview audio professionals. It's well worth the watch.